If you want to win your fantasy league, it's not just about drafting well, you also have to know when to move on from certain players. So today we are breaking down 5 players that I believe you should trade away before week 1 even begins. Because there's a decent chance week 1 comes and these players, any of the value that they currently have left is completely gone because their roles aren't as good as people think. And if you're not familiar, I'm Sal Vetri. I've been helping people win their fantasy leagues for nearly 8 years and plan to do the same for you in this video. And let's start it off with maybe one of the biggest, hottest, trendiest names I've seen in fantasy football the past decade when it comes to August risers. In the 7th round running back, Washington Commanders, Jacory Krosky-Merritt. And look, this is why it's the exact perfect time to trade him. We're going to get into all the fine details, but this is a guy whose value is skyrocketing off of not too much stuff. Okay, let's first start with like the player himself. Jacory Krosky-Merritt spent 5 years in college. He had the COVID season as well. So as you can see, 2020 was his first year, so it didn't end up counting towards his eligibility. Last year, he only plays 1 game, gets injured. 2023 was the last time that we really saw him, and he looked good. Almost 1,200 yards, was averaging 6.3 yards per carry. Now, he was granted doing it at New Mexico. Last year, he played at Arizona, although he only played 1 game before injury, was at 3 different places. And the big thing here for Jacory Krosky-Merritt, one of the reasons why I think he's a little bit overvalued is that his role is very much an early down grinder. This is a guy who, if you look at his college profile, let's look at it. 4 receptions, 10, 13, and 7. He had 34 total receptions in 4 to 5 college seasons, right? The COVID year, last year, just 1 game. So really like 3 seasons, he had basically 30 receptions. 10 catches a season in college football. 2 of those seasons, he was under 10 catches. Like, that is not going to cut it. He's not known as a strong pass catcher, which for fantasy, half PPR formats, you kind of need that. Okay, well, that's kind of part of the reason why he went in the 7th round. He was also a 24-year-old. He couldn't attend the combine for some eligibility reasons. There we go, Sal. And look, he kind of got screwed from the NCAA for that. Like, I'm not going to go against that. He maybe would have been like a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick, but at the end of the day, one in the 7th round, barely was drafted. He then goes to the NFL Combine, where if we look it up overall, like for size, he's 206 pounds. Nothing crazy, nothing terrible though by any means. So, okay, size is fine. In terms of speed, the speed is like average, 4.52 for his size, 61st percentile, has good burst. That's kind of what his profile is known for. He's kind of this a little bit short area explosiveness player, 95th percentile. So at the end of the day, you're getting a guy who played in the Mountain West, so he put up fine production, not great, especially as a receiver, in a not so great conference. He goes as a 7th round pick on a depth chart behind still some veteran running backs, even though Brian Robinson was traded away, and he's not the greatest athlete. So I begin to start to wonder, like, okay, I'm a little bit questionable on the talent, the role. Obviously, he had a great training camp. He was like the biggest buzz every single day out of Commanders beat reporters. We covered that over the offseason. And then he had this run in the preseason game when Brian Robinson rumors started. This was a run that went for 20 yards and a touchdown. Of course, you can say what you want, like the hole was extremely large. I'm sure Chris Rodriguez, Austin Ekeler, any of the running backs on this team, if they saw that hole, they would have got there. Some people say if they saw that hole, they would have got there. They probably wouldn't have. And those people I mean as like on Twitter. But at the end of the day, he scored a 20-yard touchdown. Other than that, his preseason wasn't all that impressive, but people really started to freak out when this happened. And that would be this usage in the final preseason game. Look, Brian Robinson gets traded. We kind of had the rumors all of August for the most part, so we kind of knew that, especially in mid-August, but Jacory Krosky-Merritt did not play in the final preseason game. A lot of people, including massive, we're talking like sleepers, Twitter accounts, big Twitter accounts reported this as like he's being rested with the starters. But if you actually looked into it, it was unclear if he was being rested with the starters or it was due to a shoulder injury. Going into your 3rd preseason game, after you already got run in the 2nd preseason game, and Brian Robinson is traded away, and you're kind of like the hype piece of this offense, I don't think if you have a shoulder injury just 2 days before that your team is going to play you. So my guess is that he actually, because he was seen on Thursday, 2 days before in a non-contact practice jersey, my guess is that the shoulder injury right here was the reason he didn't play in that final preseason game. But in the 2nd preseason game, Chris Rodriguez started ahead of him. Based on all reports, including their own head coach, when asked if Chris Rodriguez will take the goal line role from Brian Robinson if traded, his own head coach said yes, he will. So that's where my concern comes in. My concern is that Austin Ekeler is the proven veteran in this backfield. If we're talking about a guy who can actually maybe become a top 20 running back, I think it's Ekeler in this backfield because he's the pass catcher. He was efficient last year. By the way, believe it or not, Austin Ekeler led all running backs in yards per touch last year because he was so efficient once again as a pass catcher. This is a guy who can also pass protect, which is somewhat questionable for the 7th round rookie. We'll see what happens. Chris Rodriguez is also on this depth chart. He's not listed here on the player profile or depth charts. If you're watching this, you should maybe update that. But Chris Rodriguez is also going to be involved. And at the end of the day, let's just look at Vegas. Everybody points to Vegas, right? It's a market. It's everybody kind of puts in there. It becomes an efficient market based on where people think players will go more or less for their rushing, receiving, reception, yards, totals, all these for week 1. Well, if we look at it right now, Vegas only has Jacory Krosky-Merritt for 33.5 rushing yards. If we look at the other players on his team, Chris Rodriguez is projected for 28.5. They virtually have the same rushing yard prop. They're only separated by 5. So Vegas is saying this is going to be a split backfield. But you want to see something even crazier? Austin Eckler is projected for 22.5. They think it's going to be a 3-headed backfield. Their own quarterback, Jaden Daniels, is projected for the most rushing yards in this backfield. So when 4 different players are projected for at least 22 rushing yards and multiple guys are projected for 30 plus, I'm not going to sit here and say Jacory Krosky-Merritt, who was going in the 7th round of fantasy drafts, by the way, by the end of the summer, is this clear-cut RB1. He's in a 3-headed backfield. Maybe we get news in week 1 or we see the usage and it's actually better than I think, but as of right now, there's no indications that he's like overall the RB1. So if you can, before he plays his first game and rushes for, let's just say 7 carries for 21 yards and no score, something like that, why not try and trade him? Here's some of the recent trades. Yes, these are real trades according to the fantasy calculator database right now on the internet that are happening. Jacory Krosky-Merritt for Jordan Addison straight up. Easily give me Jordan Addison. Jacory Krosky-Merritt for Jayden Reed. Before the Jayden Reed injury news, I probably would have taken Reed. I'll hold off there. This one's just crazy. Somebody got fleeced. Jacory Krosky-Merritt for Emeka Egbuka. It's not even close, but at the end of fantasy season in the summer, in the final weeks of August and September and a couple of days ago, Jacory Krosky-Merritt going in round 7, Emeka Egbuka around 6 or 7. So somehow they're comparable in drafts. They shouldn't be. Emeka Egbuka is a way better player to have on your fantasy team. You guys got me all riled up. Just one player in. Now let's get into the second player. Before we get there, we're so close to 200,000 subscribers. So if you could just take 2 seconds, most people don't even know that they're not subscribed. They just hit the subscribe button. It would mean the world to me. Now the next player I think is worth trading away before week 1 occurs is Breece Hall, because again, if you're somebody who's tapped into fantasy football and you're looking at all my tweets all off season of the beat writer reports and all the videos that I'm dropping, sure, you know that Braylon Allen has become way more involved in the Jets backfield, probably going to be a split backfield, but a lot of your league mates just see the name Breece Hall and they're like, yeah, that guy was like an RB1 overall like 2 years ago. And maybe he wasn't the RB1 overall, but you get the point. He was an RB1 in fantasy, 6th overall, 17.1 fantasy points per game in a season where he was coming off of a torn ACL and really didn't get going until the second half of that year, but then he comes out last year and it's not the worst fantasy season, still a top 20 finisher, over 15 points per game, but when you're going as a consensus number 1 pick in fantasy drafts, obviously finishing as the RB17 is a massive letdown. But all you have to do is kind of talk to your league mates and say, you remember in 2023 when he was the RB2 in total fantasy points and dominating not only as a rusher but as a receiver? Remember that guy? Yeah, that's the guy you can trade for this year because he's no longer attached to whatever offense you want to paint it as last year with the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and a slow pace and all that type of stuff. But when it comes down to it, all the reports right now are pointing to this situation happening. Braylon Allen, the Jets love him is where all the reports are saying. He's carved out a role right now, maybe in the short yardage around the red zone when they get there, probably on 3rd downs. Who knows? He probably starts to take as a big physical 235-pound runner some early down usage. Maybe they rotate a drive here and there. And now you're spending a 4th, 5th round pick is what you spent on Breece Hall, and he's going to be splitting a backfield with his 12th round pick, Braylon Allen, and seeing similar usage. Yeah, that's a major concern. And as you can see from this tweet from Harrison on Twitter, last season as a rookie, Braylon Allen had a 90 PFF rushing grade when the Jets needed 2 yards or fewer for a first down. So he was great in these situations last year. Based on all the reports this offseason, he's going to get these exact same situations this season. And let's not forget who his quarterback is. It's no longer Breece Hall's quarterback this is. It's no longer Aaron Rodgers, who loves checking the ball down, who's not mobile, and at this age in his career, and I don't blame him, is afraid to take hits. That's why he was checking it down so much to Breece Hall last year. No, it's Justin Fields, a mobile quarterback who doesn't check the ball down. Instead, he goes and he takes off and runs. And you might find some stats on Twitter, and we've talked about them in the past, that say, oh, Justin Fields checks down 10% of the time. I think those are very small samples in specific offenses. This is not the offense where that's going to happen. This is an offense where Justin Fields is going to operate as the quarterback 1, not actually get yanked after 6 games because Fields signed a 2-year contract with a lot of guaranteed money, and there's no other real threats on this depth chart. And let's also remember that there's a connection here to David Montgomery in the Lions backfield because the new head coach of the Jets is Aaron Glenn, who was the defensive coordinator last year for the Lions. And let's not get it twisted. He was the defensive coordinator, not the offensive coordinator, but he at least got to see firsthand every single week in practice his defense go up against a 2-headed backfield and Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. And Montgomery was used very successfully, by the way, in that offense as a grinder, used in the 4th down to wear down defenses, used around the red zone where he scored 12 and 13 touchdowns the last 2 seasons in Detroit, albeit a much better offense, sure. But that could be the Braylon Allen role in this offense. Maybe Braylon Allen's the guy who starts to see 12 carries a game, and when they're leading in the 4th quarter, gets an extra 1, 2, 3 carries than he normally would have, gets the red zone and goal line usage, and maybe he's not scoring 12 or 13 touchdowns like David Montgomery has the last couple of years, but maybe this is 6, 7, 8 touchdowns and for your, I don't know, 12th, 13th, 11th round pick in fantasy drafts. That's really strong. And as just a reminder, this is what Justin Fields has done as a rusher in his career. Last year, as a limited rusher in just 6 games as a starter, 5 touchdowns. touchdowns. Same thing, year before that, limited 4 touchdowns. 8 touchdowns a year before that and over 1,100 yards. He's projected this season right now for 6.5 rushing touchdowns, for 600 rushing yards. That's all coming away from the check down opportunities for Breece Hall and the usage around the red zone. And last year, Breece Hall basically needed this usage as a receiver to actually have production. He was 4th in running back receptions with 57. In your PPR and half PPR formats, that was crucial. He was 4th overall in receiving yards amongst running backs. When you look at his touchdowns, he had 8, which is a very strong touchdown rate, solid of 3%, above the NFL average. So he now, heading into this year with Justin Fields, is definitely not going to be coming out here, in my opinion, and catching 57 balls. And when you look at his targets, he's definitely not going to have 76 targets. 5 targets per game is not coming from Justin Fields, I'm sorry, in this offense last year. And you're probably even going to see less goal line usage as well. So when it comes down to it, I'm not really that favorable for Breece Hall, who we just saw in the preseason, and we covered it this offseason, splitting a backfield 50-50, or even in the first game, 3 ways with Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen. So as you can see right here, here's some trades. Like, somebody traded Rome Odunze and Michael Pittman for Breece Hall. I kind of like Rome Odunze, like 1-for-1 right now for Breece Hall. I think Odunze was becoming like a 5th, 6th round pick in fantasy drafts at the end of summer. Breece Hall like a 4th, 5th round pick. Look at some more here. Breece Hall for Jordan Mason and Cortland Sutton. I love that trade actually more than this top one. Yeah, I think these are some deals that you can get done. These are deals that are currently getting done. Look at this one. Chase Brown and Travis Hunter for Breece Hall and Tedero McMillan. Much rather have Chase Brown than Breece Hall. Tedero McMillan and Travis Hunter, pretty similar. I'd rather have McMillan, but if we're giving the Chase Brown side of this, give me the Chase Brown side. So if you can get some of these combination or 1-for-1 deals done right now for Breece Hall before week 1, I think you should. And speaking of week 1, if you want to see my top 50 flex rankings for week 1 and the entire season to make sure you're always setting the right lineups, it's completely free with the link in the description below, or you can just type into your browser or your phone, flexrankings.com. That is flexrankings.com. And that will take you to this page where you just enter your email. The flex rankings will be sent to you. Make sure to check your spam and promotional folders, especially on Google. It goes to your promotional folders a lot. So be sure to check that. And that will send you my top 50 flex rankings, not just for week 1, but the entire year. But if you want more than just the top 50, because obviously, you know, there's more than 50 players you can start every week across all the different running back, wide receiver, and tight end positions, well, I have my top 150 flex rankings, all my positional rankings, waiver wire tools, matchup notes, and a whole lot more in the Fantasy Blueprint. It's what I use in all my leagues, and over 10,000 people are currently using in their leagues. You can check out the Blueprint with the link in the description below. It'll take you to this page, and you can just read up on exactly what you get in the Blueprint, the origin stories, and you could read all these reviews from some of the people last year who joined and are now back this year. Again, almost 90% of people, we've said this before, who were signed up last year are back this year, because I think that's the best stat to show. 9 out of 10 people liked it last year to come back this year. It's probably a quality product. So if you want all the tools that you need from week 1 all the way to your championship week to help you smack around your friends and make them wonder, how did this guy get so good at fantasy, and calm those nerves that you get on Sunday nights if you lose your matchup and now you're concerned about getting smack talked and losing your league and your league punishment. Ooh, that was a lot. Be sure to check out the Blueprint at jointheblueprint.com or with the link in the description below. Boys, I just went off right there. And ladies, by the way, just went off right there, running a million miles a minute to mouth. Okay, now let's get back into it here. Nick Chubb is one of the best pure runners in football. We all know this, right? But in fantasy football, you have to separate the name from the past production, especially when it comes to somebody like Nick Chubb. Because Nick Chubb is approaching 30 years old, coming off of one of the worst injuries, the dislocated knee and torn MCL that we saw in week 2 of 2023. Sure, that was nearly 2 years ago now, but this is a guy that injury ends careers usually in the late parts of your career, and he basically suffered a similar injury in college. He was able to bounce back from that, have a strong NFL career, but now at this point in his career, at 30 years old or so, and having these injuries he's coming off of, he's not that appealing, but he's technically going to be the week 1 starter for the Houston Texans. Because we know Joe Mixon is banged up. He's going to miss at least the first 4 weeks, maybe even more, but this is what Nick Chubb did last year, by the way. He averaged 3.2 yards per carry with the Browns coming off of that injury, 67th in the league, just 3.4 yards per touch when you factor in his receiving production. That was on about 12 carries per game, didn't even average 8 fantasy points per game. Obviously not great. He didn't look explosive. He didn't look fast. He didn't look powerful, but now he's another year removed from that injury, so let's give him a little bit of a break there. But I will still say I'm a little bit concerned here. Now, again, this is the Joe Mixon update. He'll miss at least 4 games, but it seems like Mixon can miss a lot more. This is courtesy of my tweet, by the way, right? That's why I'm not actually sourcing it, because this is mine. I made this tweet, this photo. It's so beautiful on Instagram. Actually, this is on Instagram. You can check it out if you want. On all platforms, we're live everywhere. But you can see Nick Chubb should start the season as the RB1, but as I say here, but expect Dameon Pierce and Woody Marks to be involved. Dameon Pierce was reportedly threatening Nick Chubb actually for a starting job on this team as the RB2, not the starting job, the RB2. And Nick Chubb, there was reports he was going to get cut until Joe Mixon's injury came out. But then Nick Chubb went out there in the final preseason game that he played, and he played 79% of the snaps with the first team offense and saw 100% of the backfield opportunities. Joe Mixon still doesn't have a timeline for return. This is before we had that injury news. So Chubb is expected to start week 1. So basically, we got confirmation that Chubb is the starter week 1 based on that usage, but it should be mentioned, Dameon Pierce dealt with an early camp injury. In the final preseason game, Dameon Pierce was actually seeing the starter usage with Nick Chubb resting. And there are a lot of reports and rumors coming out right now from some beat reporters, if you read between the lines, that this is actually going to be a split backfield between Dameon Pierce and Chubb. And Pierce is not this all like world beater either. He's not an amazing running back, but he is the younger running back compared to Nick Chubb. He probably has a little bit more burst and explosiveness, and maybe it doesn't happen week 1, but I would say by like maybe week 2 or 3, you start to see like a 50-50, if not even more touches for Dameon Pierce. And then you factor in the Woody Marks problem here, a 4th round rookie that they spent decent draft capital on, a guy who's easily the best pass catching running back in this backfield, a guy who also in preseason looked good on his touches, and more importantly showed that he can pass protect, which is extremely important for a rookie running back to get on the field. And you can see some of the stuff right here, some of the film. Rookie running back in the 4th round showing some interesting stuff in the preseason. Woody Marks was known best for his receiving abilities and movement skills, but here in the preseason he runs stronger than I thought he would, and he has some nice vision as well. A lot of this was against 2nd and 3rd string defenses, so again, you have to take it with a grain of salt, but he did look good. Cutback run here, you can see. He did look good on some of his carries in the games, but the biggest thing was the pass protection for me. We know he can catch passes. As a 4th round running back, you're probably going to have some level of decent instincts and vision. It comes down to pass protection, and he showed that in the preseason. So my concern for Nick Chubb is that I don't think he's going to be a factor. Like, I don't think he's going to get you more than 12 carries for 30 or 40 yards in week 1, and you're hoping for a touchdown, and then he's going to be in a 3-headed backfield possibly. So as he has some value right now, people have the name value. They view him as a week 1 starter. Just trade him away because he might lose it all after week 1. And you might be saying, oh, I can't get anything for Nick Chubb. No, you can get some stuff for Nick Chubb. 1-for-1 deal just happened recently for Josh Downs on the fantasy trade calculator. I'd easily do that. 1-for-1 deal for Khalil Shakur. I'd easily do that. Look at this deal. Nick Chubb and Wan'Dale Robinson for Jalen Waddle. I mean, obviously that's a fleece. Give me Jalen Waddle all day long. All of these trades I would much rather have the other side than the Nick Chubb side. Obviously there's different positions. Nick Chubb for Dak Prescott depends on your team needs there. But all these things, I don't think Nick Chubb holds any value like heading into week 3 or 4 of this season, especially if Joe Mixon was to come back week 5. So as he has some value right now, yeah, swap him for Josh Downs, the Colts' #1 receiver if you can. Now the next player I think you should try and trade at while you still can is DeAndre Swift, the player a lot of people were drafting because they believe he's finally going to get a workhorse role. And look, I admit, like, there was no competition brought in this offseason for DeAndre Swift. Just a 7th round rookie and Kyle Monangai. Nobody really added in free agency, and no serious threats in the draft. I'm not considering a 7th round rookie, Kyle Monangai, a serious threat, even though like fantasy Twitter loves these 7th round running backs. But this is a guy who was coming off of career high usage with the Bears last year. And at points in the season when Caleb Williams was struggling, this was like the engine of the offense. It was Swift for nearly 1,000 rushing yards, nearly 400 receiving yards. He had over 1,300 total yards last year on 253 carries, by the way. Like, let's look at his role. His overall usage, top 10 in snap share at the running back position, 7th in opportunity share, 76% is elite. He was used last year as a workhorse running back, so it makes sense when you see that no competition was brought in this offseason. The only thing that happened was a better offensive line, a better coach, a quarterback entering year 2 now. Like, you would think, oh, the workhorse role that was good last year, maybe it gets better this year. But then you start to break down into some things, and you look last year, and it's not like his efficiency was any good. Swift ranked 59th in true yards per carry, and his explosive rate was in the bottom 3rd of the league. He actually finished with negative EPA per rush attempt, which means that every time they handed Swift the ball, they were technically losing real-life game points. Now, again, part of that's because of DeAndre Swift. His early season first 4 weeks were absolutely atrocious. Bad offensive line, right? So some of it's him and some of it's his environment. And the thought process is now that environment should change because, of course, like we just mentioned, the offensive line is massively improved. We'll see what happens on the offensive line. 2nd round pick, Ozzie Trapillo. They go and get Jonah Jackson, Joe Thuney, Drew Thalman in free agency and in trades this offseason. Obviously, they bring in Ben Johnson as well, who we saw him orchestrate a very strong running game in Detroit the past couple of seasons, including years ago when DeAndre Swift was on his team with the Detroit Lions. So look, all these things are like good. Obviously, the situation is good for Swift. That's why people are spending like a 6th round fantasy pick on him. But here is the concern. He's just kind of replaceable at this point is what I would say. I think he'll probably get some good quality fantasy weeks the first month of the season, but at some point this year, probably another back will be involved if I had to guess. Now, DeAndre Swift, week 3 of the preseason, people started to really get excited because he played 71% of the snaps with the starters, but we should mention this is what happened here. As I point out, in that game, both Roschon Johnson and Kyle Monangai missed the game with injuries. Roschon Johnson being the bigger piece here because apparently, according to offseason reports, Johnson is kind of set into that potentially 2-minute offense role, short yardage role, 3rd down pass protection role, which makes sense because he's probably the best pass catcher, and I would say best pass protector and arguably the best pass catcher running back right there with Swift in this backfield at this stage in his career. It's probably still DeAndre Swift. Kyle Monangai apparently had a good camp, just can't pass protect, so I don't know how much he'll be involved. So I do think Swift, like I said, he'll have a good start to the season, but by the time it's like week 6, 7, Roschon Johnson, I wouldn't be shocked if after week 1, it's a split backfield. Wouldn't be shocked, maybe a little surprised, but by the time it's like week 4 or 5, if Roschon Johnson could actually continue to have positive success in the red zone like he did last year, 6 touchdowns on only like 20% of the snaps, then maybe they start trusting him in different situations, like the 2-minute offense, like on third downs. And now Swift goes from a player who last year had 40 plus catches, 1,300 yards, to now he's in a split backfield trying to fight for 1,000 yards. And as a 6th-round pick, it's not worth it compared to his running mate, Roschon Johnson, who's probably available on 90% of waiver wires right now. Now, obviously, that's just one picture I can paint. You could also paint the point where DeAndre Swift week 1 looks great and he just commands his backfield. So I get that. But as it stands right now, if you can upgrade Swift, like right now, 1-for-1 for Chris Olave, probably a fair deal, depends on the needs you need or team needs there. It's probably more likely going to happen in some sort of combination deal. Travis Hunter and DeAndre Swift for T. Higgins, probably a fair deal, not really jumping up and down for that one. But you can see some deals that are happening right here. Like in a massive deal here where you end up getting CeeDee Lamb in this side and Travis Hunter feels pretty good to get the best player in this trade in a CeeDee Lamb. At the end of the day, throw some floaters out there for DeAndre Swift because he's at best an RB2 flex option for you, but at worst, he's just somebody you can't even start by the time week 7 or 8 comes if they indeed get 2 or 3 other backs involved in this backfield. Now, let me ask you something quick. Do you ever get to the point in your work week where you just think, I need something to look forward to? For me, that's been checking out Yankees games lately because there's nothing like being at a stadium, grabbing a beer, and watching Aaron Judge launch a 450-foot home run. Which is why I want to give the sponsor of today's video, SeatGeek, a huge shout out. With over 28 million downloads, they are the #1 rated ticketing app, and for good reason. They've got tickets for over 70,000 events, concerts, sports, festivals, you name it. Now, I love using SeatGeek because they make the whole experience dead simple. I just pop open the app, and what I love is they actually rate every ticket from 1 to 10, so you know if it's a good deal. Green dot equals good, and red equals not so much. Plus, every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee, and you know that I had to come through for you all. You can use code VETRI10 for 10% off your next set of tickets over on SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets, any amount when you use code VETRI10 on SeatGeek now. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later on. Thank you, SeatGeek, for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back into it. Next up, let's talk about another running back in Caleb Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers, their 3rd-round pick, who in a lot of leagues there was a ton of hype for him to potentially put up some monster numbers this season. Look, he was dominant in college last year. Steelers take him in the 3rd round with their 2nd pick because they didn't have a 2nd-round pick. That's what they spent on their DK Metcalf trade. And of course, the big thing was Najee Harris is gone. 300 touches, 300 plus opportunities, both as a runner and receiver, are now up for grabs in this backfield. Jaylen Warren's probably not going to see all of those, so enter Caleb Johnson. But the reality is, based on everything we saw in the preseason, it didn't look good for Caleb Johnson. Again, he's a 3rd-round rookie. Maybe they were just trying to see him get a little bit more usage and not rush him into things, right? A lot of times in the preseason, depending on the team, that can happen. But Jaylen Warren rested with the starters. In the 3rd game when the starters played, operated as the starting running back. Kenny Gainwell, in all 3 games, the free agent addition coming over from the Eagles, all 3 of these games, he played ahead of Caleb Johnson as the RB2 on the team. So right now, the depth chart entering week 1, Jaylen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, Caleb Johnson is what it appears. Now, I will say that I do think at some point, and you can see right here, like you can see that's exactly what it says. Warren was the early down back with Gainwell being the 3rd down back in the final preseason game. Might take a good amount of time for Caleb Johnson to make an impact is what Chris says over on Twitter. I would agree with this. At the end of the day, they did spend a 3rd-round pick on the guy. He did have a massively productive college season last year. He was awesome. 1,000+ yards after contact. Amazing, nearly 6.5 yards per carry in the 4th quarter alone last year. So I wouldn't just write this guy off, but I will say it looked like week 1 he was going to be like a workhorse who could maybe see 15+ touches. Now that might not happen until like week 4. So if you spent a 6th-round pick on him and you can get something in exchange, we'll look at some of the options in a second, I would try and do so. If you want to hold on to him until maybe he pops off week 1 with a nice performance and then you just want to see how it goes, that's also fine. This isn't a, you got to get these guys off your rosters. Some of them I would say you do, like Jacory Krosky-Merritt while you have that high value. But right now, Caleb Johnson's stock's a little bit lower, so maybe you hold and wait. But the outlook definitely does not look as good as it did a month ago when a lot of people, including myself, thought he might be the RB1 right away on this team. It seems like he's at best the RB2, probably the RB3. And it's also important to say that his quarterback is Aaron Rodgers, who again, like we mentioned earlier, doesn't want to take hits at this point in his career, is going to trust a veteran like a Jaylen Warren in pass protection potentially more, and is not going to trust a Caleb Johnson who's not known as a pass catching running back who Aaron Rodgers can check the ball down to. That's what Kenneth Gainwell is known for, an explosive pass catching running back. So maybe Aaron Rodgers being here is actually hurting Caleb Johnson's chances of getting on the field a little bit. That's at least a thought I had. So when it comes down to it, like right now, Caleb Johnson, some of the trades, it's going to have to be package deals. You can see Caleb Johnson, Jaylen Warren, and Jordan Addison for Pacheco and Hunter. Oh yeah, I mean, obviously give me the Hunter and Pacheco side, a 5th and 6th round fantasy pick for just some guy. I mean, this is a pretty fair deal overall, but I'd rather have the upside of Travis Hunter and Pacheco here. You can see a bunch of different options here. Cooper Kupp and Chase Brown with a Joe Mixon, Caleb Johnson. Obviously, these people get fleeced. Joe Mixon might not even play football. Oh, that's an IDP league because TJ Watt's in it. So check that. But either way, some of the options you can see. Check out fantasycalc.com. We're not affiliated or sponsored in any way. It's just something that I use to see some real-time trades happening right now. Now, we do quickly want to touch on one more situation. And before you freak out because you see the face of Puka Nacua right here, let me actually point this out. I'm not telling you, that's why this is just a little bit of an added on thing that I want to mention. I'm not telling you to go trade Puka Nacua. He's not one of the 5 players. We've already talked about 5 players in this video. It's just something I want to bring up at the end of this video to just say, beware and a little bit cautious of Puka Nacua. There's a reason why he was often dropping out of the first round of fantasy drafts into the second round towards the end of August and early September because of one big reason. It has nothing to do with Puka Nacua, who we know is an elite player. Last year, coming off of an injury, had a 44% target rate. 44% of his routes he was targeted on. If this is 30%, it's elite. He was at 44%, number 1 in the NFL. 30% of his team's targets, also elite, top 5 in the NFL. So we know Puka has the talent, prime of his career, absolute workhorse from an efficiency and production standpoint. I'm mostly just concerned about his aging quarterback, Matthew Stafford, who's had so many back problems this summer. Because right now, Matthew Stafford is reportedly ready to go for week 1. That's all fine and well, but what's going to happen after week 1 when he takes a couple of hits, or week 2 or 3 into the season, where the 37, nearly 38-year-old quarterback has been dealing with back injuries? Literally just 2 weeks ago, Matthew Stafford went out there and threw 50 passes in a practice, wasn't hit, wasn't rushed, was just dropping back and throwing the ball, and he had back soreness for a week after that and had to miss more practices. Like, that's a concern. And a back isn't like a broken bone where, yes, the timeline is like 3 or 4 months, and as long as you're rehabbing properly, your muscles will be fine and not atrophy, and you'll be good to go. A back injury could feel okay 1 minute, literally 1 minute, and the next minute you get hit and now you're screwed for a month plus. Now here's a sample of Puka Nacua. If we just look back, 2022, by the way, when Matthew Stafford missed a lot of time, the Rams offense fell apart, but Puka Nacua wasn't there. The only sample we have of Puka Nacua without Stafford is last year. So 2 games, or 2023, I should say. In that season, 2 games without Matthew Stafford, Nacua went from averaging in his rookie year 18.5 points per game with Stafford and 94 yards per game to, in those 2 games without Stafford, just 10 points per game, nearly half the production, and only 37 yards per game. It's obvious, especially with this offensive line in the Rams, but some guys on it battling some injuries, potentially chronic injuries. It's going to be a concern if Matthew Stafford misses time. It goes from Puka Nacua being a first to second round fantasy pick to, like, you're hoping you get 4th, 5th, 6th round value out of the guy if the backup quarterback has to come in. Here's the report that we're getting right now from Deepak Chona, again, a sports MD, a doctor over on Twitter. Let me actually just pause this video quickly. You can see right here, likely to be playing week 1 without any limits, but the concern is a bad hit or trunk rotation while throwing may re-aggravate the disc herniation. Very difficult to play through that pain even for Stafford. So, like he says here, he's going to play week 1, but there is high concern that if this quarterback, which quarterbacks get hit every single game, even if it's not a sack, they get hit after the play, whatever it is, right? And if it is a sack, even worse, if he just gets twisted the wrong way, it's going to be too hard for him to have to play through that. So I just really don't like my 1st or 2nd round pick that I drafted going to potentially have to be attached to Jimmy Garoppolo or even Stetson Bennett so far at some point this year, because look, Stafford's an older quarterback with a back problem. That is very concerning. It's not like this is just an injury that we're saying, hey, it could happen. It's literally happening right now as we speak. As I'm speaking right now, he's rehabbing still this back injury. Gonna play week 1, but he's still rehabbing the same back injury. So when it comes to Puka Nacua, like I said, this is a big time name. So if you could just go flop him for like an Amon-Ra St. Brown straight up, or look at this deal. David Montgomery and Puka Nacua for Josh Jacobs, who a lot of people can argue should have been a 1st round pick in fantasy, and Travis Etienne, pretty similar value there. Obviously, I'd rather have the Puka side if Stafford stays healthy all year. You can see this one right here. Travis Etienne and Puka Nacua for James Cook and Garrett Wilson. That's not as good. I'd still rather have the Puka side, but there's some nice deals that are going on right now. Bijan Robinson and a deal with Puka, and you throw in a Travion Henderson. Okay, that doesn't feel as good. Puka Nacua for Travis Hunter is just crazy unless that's an IDP league, but this first one's a pretty good one. You get Josh Jacobs to close 1st round value, Travis Etienne. Maybe you can go out there and just kind of get a 1-for-1 deal. Maybe somebody's a Rams fan in your league, and you go and you trade him 1-for-1 for like an Amon-Ra St. Brown or somebody that doesn't have the same quarterback injury concerns entering the season. So these are 5 players, including the little bonus info about Puka Nacua, that you can consider trading away before week 1 begins, and possibly any value they have left is gone. Now you might be sitting there and saying, outside of the trade calculator, well, who are some players we should try and trade for? Well, I'm happy you asked. In these 2 videos right here, you'll see the running backs and the wide receivers I believe you should trade for before week 1 begins, because once week 1 starts, I think they're going to have good performances, have a lot of potential value, and then you're not going to get them, or you're going to have to trade a lot more for them. So check out these 2 videos. It'll help you a ton.